Coming off a big win against the Lions, almost half the Seahawks roster is on the injury report heading into week 3. How concerned should the team be about a number of starters that haven't practiced this week? We'll be breaking it all down in our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on Blue Friday by my co-host Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening in Prescott, Arizona, or Manila in the Philippines. We greatly appreciate you making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We're drawing closer to game day, but the Seahawks somehow are not getting healthier heading into Sunday's game. The injury list even longer on Thursday than it was on Wednesday. Where should the concern level be for the Seahawks on a number of starters that haven't practiced or have been limited this week? We'll be breaking that down, plus our keys to victory, picks to click, and our game predictions as we do each and every Blue Friday. A special thanks again to all the 12s for listening in to this episode brought your way by the Game Time app. Create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now for your lead story here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The Seahawks came out of their overtime win against the Lions banged up, and that might be an understatement. Seattle had 9 players that were out in Wednesday's practice, and somehow that number went up to 11 yesterday. Nick, Quandre Diggs, and Damian Lewis being added as non-participants, dealing with hamstring and groin injuries. This is not a good situation for any football team, particularly in week 3, to have this long of an injury list. And now suddenly that early bye that everybody was complaining about in May that's coming up in a couple weeks, that's looking pretty appealing right now for the Seahawks.
Yeah, they're going to limp crawl to that. And this injury report is longer than my order at Twister Donuts in Olympia. I mean, it's almost reached a baker's dozen at this point. The 11 non-participants on Thursday, very troubling. Of course, sounds like Tariq Woolen's going to be out. And Jaron Reed is concerning as well. And you can just go down the list. But for me, just what jumps out off the page that's concerning immediately, just the offensive line is banged up. Jaron Reed is another one. That's, in the interior line, we already have Mike Morris and IR. I know they're not exactly the same position. Cam Young has played 19 snaps in 2 games. If Reed can't go, it's Matt Gotel time, or I think Carl Davis, perhaps promotion. And the Panthers are actually 3rd in the NFL in yards per carry. So it's not like the Seahawks can just hope that the Panthers just fumble themselves and don't take advantage of this banged up interior. Really, both trenches are really, really banged up, and I don't expect Tariq Woolen to be there. So secondary as well. Diggs is another one that I'm really hoping gets back for a number of reasons, which I'll detail later. But yeah, what really jumps out off the page to me currently is just the trenches. We expect Charles Cross that's going to be tough to get back. Damian Lewis is now in there. So both sides of the trenches, Corbin, where we know our most football games are won and lost, those both sides are really banged up.
Yeah, the offensive line, the only silver lining here is that Evan Brown, after missing a couple of snaps on Sunday with a knee injury, he was a full participant on Thursday. So at least your center looks like he is trending in the right direction. But Phil Haynes went from being limited on Wednesday to being out on Thursday with a calf issue. Damian Lewis has an ankle injury, so he didn't practice yesterday. Charles Cross still day-to-day, but I would be stunned if he's even in consideration to play this weekend with that sprained big toe. They're going to roll with Stone Forsythe again. So this offensive line, you're looking at 4 of your 5 starters that their status is questionable going into this game. We know Abe Lucas is on injured reserve, so he's not going to be playing either. So that offensive line is in shambles right now from an injury perspective. You have to hope that Damian Lewis and Phil Haynes, they just need a couple days off just to get their bodies back in order and that they'll be ready to go. on Sunday. And on defense, the Jaron Reed injury is the one that I have circled because Reek Woolen, we've known since early in the week that he probably wasn't going to be able to play in this game. Probably only going to miss one game with this chest injury, and he should be good to go for their week 4 matchup against the Giants. But that defensive line, you just lost Mike Morris for what looks to be a season-ending injury after playing just one game, and he was a promising rookie. You already have thin depth at that position. If Jaron Reed is not 100% or close to 100% or doesn't play at all, yeah, you're looking at a massive drop-off there where you're asking a rookie and Cam Young to step in as the starter. You might have to slide Miles Adams some in at nose tackle at 300 pounds. You're going to have to call up somebody like Matt Gotel that's never played a snap in a regular season game. Carl Davis has played a lot of snaps in the NFL, but he literally just signed with you and your practice squad earlier this week. So who knows where he's at conditioning-wise to be able to play. So there are a lot of issues on here. I guess if you're looking for any other silver linings, DK Metcalf has made it clear he's going to play. They made him available on Wednesday to media, so he is going to play in this game. Will Dissly, they're hoping, just giving him a couple of days to rest his shoulder, that he will be fine. Quandre Diggs, probably a veteran maintenance day more than anything, so looking promising for him to play. The other thing I want to mention here, I don't know that this is a big deal or not, but Jamal Adams had his first practice as a full participant on Wednesday. He was back down to being limited yesterday. Now, that might just have been, hey, we don't want 2 days in a row where you're going full bore, but that is something to keep an eye on for fans that are hoping that Jamal Adams is going to play this week. I still think it's possible that he could get some snaps against the Panthers, but at the same time, you got to believe the Seahawks want to see him get an entire week where he's doing full work before they're ready to do that and throw him into the lineup coming off the injury he's returning from.
Yeah, you don't want to push that, especially in just looking back at the offensive line. It's another week of backup tackles, like you mentioned. Even if the Damian Lewis gets back, and he might not be 100%. And it seems like the Seahawks schemed well for that dilemma last week. You mentioned I think in your crossover episode, that it is unfortunate that the Panthers kind of have a little film on how the Seahawks operate with backup tackles, and maybe they can't come out and surprise, maybe a bit more than like against the Lions. And Carolina is actually 9th in pass rush win rate, and the Lions are 30th. So the Panthers might be a bit more of a problem, which is kind of surprising, but they do have they have some talents on the defense. So this is not going to be another walk in the park, or it wasn't last week, but it's not going to be a walk in the park. Even if we see Panthers 0-2, number 1 overall pick, okay, no. They got some talent on defense, and this offensive line, especially with the health they got, took a huge hit. They're going to have their hands full once again. And you know what I'm realizing, Corbin, just reading all this, is just how fortunate the Seahawks were last year. A lot of, not a lot, but a portion of the success the Seahawks had last year was the fortunate health luck that they had. And that is part of some of having a successful NFL season, is getting a little bit of lady luck on your side on health. And right now the Seahawks, I don't know what they did to tick her off, but she's ticked off right now at the Seahawks. Hopefully we can get back in Lady Luck's good graces later.
As former ESPN host Trey Wingo tweeted yesterday, when you get asked who's going to win the Super Bowl, the answer really should be who is going to be the healthiest, because that's really what it boils down to. And so far, Seattle has had worse luck with injuries than what they did a year ago. You have to hope that they can rebound from that. And I guess the good news is most of these injuries, they don't sound like they are long-term things. You didn't get fortune with Mike Morris, but most of these players, it sounds like, hey, we can get them back in a week or two if they're not able to play this week. And you do also get Boye Mafe and Devin Bush most likely back in the lineup after they sat out against the Lions. So especially with Mafe, this Panthers team can run the football really well. So having him available in the starting lineup would be a big boost for this run defense that has been pretty solid, knock on wood, here in the first 2 weeks. Coming up next, we're going to be looking at our keys to victory. How can this banged-up Seahawks team get a second straight win and get their first victory of the season at Lumen Field? We'll be looking on offense and defense coming up next year on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks, which is brought your way by our friends at Game Time. If you've ever been on the hunt for sports or concert tickets at the last minute, the process can be anxiety-provoking. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful, and the Game Time app is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you, with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. If you're wanting to see the Seahawks battle the Panthers at Lumen Field and have an itch for putting together a last-minute road trip, use Game Time's awesome flash deals feature with a detailed stadium map, and you can get awesome seats right now for under $85. It's super easy. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Missing the syrup for your pancakes or just ran out of your favorite coffee creamer? With DoorDash grocery delivery, you can get what you want right when you need it. You've trusted DoorDash to deliver your restaurant favorites, and now you can get grocery delivery that actually delivers too. With thousands of grocery stores to choose from, you'll find the best in your neighborhood and boost your local economy. With each and every order, you'll get exactly what you ordered, or we'll make it right. So sit back and enjoy quality groceries just like you picked them yourself. Want even more value? You can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders with a Dash Pass membership. With easy substitutions right in the app and best-in-class customer support, DoorDash delivers groceries exactly how you want it. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to a $20 value when you use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout. Limited time offer and terms apply. That's 50% off, up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter the code LOCKEDONNFL. Don't forget that's LOCKEDONNFL for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. You're listening to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined today by my co-host, Nick Lee, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Don't forget, coming up after the game on Sunday, as always, I will be going live with my post-game show, key storylines coming out of the Seahawks battle against the Panthers, game balls, and of course, 3 Up, 3 Down, our weekly stock watch. You won't want to miss it. Let's get to our keys to victory, Nick, for this week. And a lot of times when you're going into a game, the Seahawks are 6-point favorites. The Panthers have really struggled on offense these first couple of weeks, and the defense has played well, but they have not been able to win either one of their first 2 games. The Seahawks are coming off that big win in Detroit. So a lot of times when you go into a matchup like this, you're trying to look for keys to victory, and sometimes it can be a little bit tricky because you're like, man, if they just play their game, they should be able to win this one. It doesn't necessarily feel like that, though, in this game because of how well the Panthers have played on defense the first 2 games and the fact that they came into Seattle last December. I know there was a lot of different players, but they came in and just beat down the Seahawks with their run game.
Yeah, it's just they out physical, they out executed and out physical the Seahawks last year, and the Seahawks would do well to try to return the favor this year, even with a banged up offensive line. So I think first off, you got to we say it all the time on this podcast: establish the run. A lot of things kind of go away. A lot of problems seem to go away if you can run the football. And as good as the Panthers have been on defense, they're actually 22nd in yards per carry allowed this year. So it's despite a pretty strong front 7, they have allowed some yards in the run game. So I think you got to go there. And for me, one thing that's jumped out to me as well is there's this weird, like they are number 2 or 3 as far as being really good at not allowing yards after the catch. But they're also dead last in missed tackles in the NFL. So there's an opportunity there, I think, for some yards after contact, yards after catch, the yak. I think the yak is a big key here because with you have Ken Walker III, you have your physical wide receivers, Lockett, Metcalf, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, time to go there. I think if you can create some yak and get those and create some of those missed tackles, turn a 6-yard catch into a 20-yard gain. Ken Walker was 15th in the NFL last year in yards after contact. Right now he's 36th. I need to see a bit more in that regard. I know it's a little early for that, but I think just creating some yards after contact and yards after catch, both YAC acronyms, I guess, that we see in the NFL a lot. Both of those with breaking tackles, creating those missed tackles, because clearly the Panthers do have trouble wrapping up on the first go. So make them miss, make them break, force those break tackles and get those extra few yards, get those first downs, and sustain those drives with those missed tackles forced.
Yeah, the missed tackle thing jumped out to me when I was looking at the stats. And then when I went back and I watched both of the Panthers' previous games, what they have done so well is they swarm to the football really well. And so even if somebody does miss a tackle, there's usually another defender there. So giving them credit, they play with high energy. This is a defense that swarms to the football. They're really good at pursuing sideline to sideline. So that missed tackle stat can be a little misleading. And yet at the same time, if you've watched them, particularly against the run, backs have been able to create a lot of yardage after contact. And that has not been a strength for this Seahawks team. I do think, and I mentioned this earlier this week, I'm not saying that Ken Walker III shouldn't be the starter. I think Ken Walker III should still be your workhorse, but I want to see more Zach Charbonnet. And especially in this game, with his ability to power through tackles, this may be the game where he has a breakout of sorts, because this is a Panthers team that already was struggling with tackling, and now they're going to be without their stud linebacker, Shaq Thompson, who suffered a potentially season-ending ankle injury in their loss Monday night at New Orleans. So I think that missing him in the middle, and Pete Carroll kind of hinted at it. He didn't say, hey, we're going to take advantage of this, but well, we'll see what they look like without him in the middle. I'm curious to see what this Panthers run defense has already not been great with him in the lineup, what they look like with the tackling issues they've had. And as good as that front line is, they can get pushed around a little bit. So you're hoping, like I said in the beginning of the show, that you can get Damian Lewis and Phil Haynes healthy, and you're going to have your two backup tackles that played pretty well in the run game, especially Jake Curhan the other day, that if you can get those guys back in the middle healthy and they're ready to go Sunday, that you can impose your will a little bit up front and speed the game up a little bit with that run game, slow down that pass rush. And that leads to my other key on offense for the Seahawks. I want to see them get that play action passing game going again. That was, to me, the biggest difference offensively between where they were at in week 1 against the Rams, where they only had 6 play action plays the entire game. When you have Geno Smith and you have the running game the Seahawks have, if you get out of a game running just 6 play actions, you should revoke your offensive coordinator card, in my opinion. But they came out, they got that play action game going, and the Panthers are going to be without J.C. Horn, who had a huge game last year against Geno Smith. And I think him not being out there, not taking anything away from Dante Jackson and Henderson, the 2 starting corners for the Panthers, that pair is better than a lot of teams have. But there's a big drop-off from J.C. Horn in terms of playmaking ability. The Panthers only have 7 pass breakups this year. I feel like with the receivers Seattle has, if you can get that run game going a little bit, you're going to be able to pick and choose a few times when you can take your shots downfield against this Panthers secondary. And I think there will be some chances to hit on some big plays. Again, they got to have that run game rolling, but get the play action going and cook it up offensively. Now, on defense, I think this game really boils down to defense more than anything for the Seahawks, because we saw some signs last week, Nick. Pass rush found some life in the second half. They were able to generate a number of turnovers, and yet they still gave up over 400 yards of offense. And so there's still a lot of room for improvement. You're going against a team that is near the bottom of the league in nearly every offensive category, but they have the red rifle, Andy Dalton, playing quarterback this week. And if you know Seattle backup quarterback jinxes, Andy Dalton is near the top of that hierarchy with Colt McCoy. And he always seems to find the fountain of youth and really turn it on when he plays the Seahawks. His numbers last year were not that great. They really the Saints beat the Seahawks with Taysom Hill's running. The Panthers don't have a Taysom Hill, but they do have a good running game. And Andy Dalton has just been one of those QBs that always seems to play at his best against the Seahawks.
Yeah, it was really funny to read, on those tweets, yeah, Bryce Young's out, Andy Dalton's playing. All the Seahawks fans oh no. it was sick. And I don't know if I was what's the problem? It's the backup quarterback. And no, you don't understand. You don't understand what it's like. So at 3-1 against the Seahawks, Andy Dalton is. You're tweeting out, over 270 yards average per game passing. I mean, he's played really well against the Seahawks. Obviously, he's had maybe some better supporting casts than the Panthers currently have. And it's not like the Panthers rolling out there with Randy Moss and Tyreek Hill right now. That's why I'm not quite as concerned about the Tyreek Woolen injury here as well. But for me, just be sound. sounding your gaps and just clean it up and be sound and against the run. Make them one-dimensional, and you're going to get chances to. So my biggest thing is kind of flipping it on the other side of kind of my point with the Panthers defense. And in fact, I feel like the Seahawks could learn a lot from how the Carolina Panthers operate on defense, just with the swarming, the desire of the way they play defense. I really wish the Seahawks would play like that week in, week out. We see spurts of it, but I think right now the Panthers play a little bit more inspired defense, and I think that the Seahawks can learn a thing or two there. And that starts with not missing tackles. And, stay on target, as the X-wing fighter, as he's trying to blow up the Death Star, says. Stay on target, get in there and make the tackle when you have a chance on 3rd and 4 to make the tackle to make it 4th and 1, and don't miss it to where they get 15 yards in the first down. Or 2nd and 10, make that tackle to make it 3rd and 8 instead of letting him break it and get to 3rd and 1, that kind of thing. Stay on target, make it happen on defense, on tackling, be sound in tackling, because I mentioned that the Panthers are dead last in missed tackles total. The Seahawks are second to last. The only team worse than the Seahawks in broken tackles right now are the Carolina Panthers. So the Seahawks themselves are not sound tacklers right now. So that is what I ask. Just be sound tackling. And when you have an opportunity to tackle them short of the sticks, you got to get it done.
One of the things that I've been encouraged by, even dating back to training camp, I remember mentioning this during training camp, that I was impressed with the way that the Seahawks front line was handling run fits. And you have Bobby Wagner back. You know that he's outstanding at that, being able to get downhill, a healthy Jordan Brooks. It does seem like that front seven, that the run gap integrity has just been taken up several notches. And maybe it's just because you've got veterans like Bobby Wagner that just know how to do that out of their sleep. Like you could put a blindfold on and Bobby Wagner's going to know what gap he's supposed to go to. But the gap integrity has been much better. It's going to have to continue to trend that way because Carolina has a 50-50 split right now for gap and zone runs. They are good at running both of them. The offensive line is better equipped for run blocking than it is pass protection overall. They got some physical tackles. The interior line, with the injuries that they've had there, the backups are better suited to run the football with behind them, let them get physical. So this is a game where you're going to have to man up, you're going to have to buckle up, and you're going to have to play sound gap integrity, or else you're going to have a repeat of last year where you didn't have to deal with Miles Sanders, but we saw what Chuba Hubbard did to him last year, and their third-string running back came in and had some big plays. So that was the big reason the Panthers were able to come to Seattle and win. So you have got to win up front. You got to play sound with your gaps. And the tackling thing, really both these teams just finish plays. And Seattle, what was driving me nuts last week is Sam Laporta is a good tight end. He was a guy that I had at Seattle pegged to pick maybe as a potential guy in the middle rounds. But there were a couple plays where they had him stopped, and then he broke 2 or 3 tackles, ended up picking up big yardage that extended drives. And there were other missed tackles in the run game. Darrell Taylor had a 3-yard tackle for loss that turned into a 6-yard gain. You cannot do that against a team that can run the football like the Panthers. And Carolina doesn't have many guys that can beat you deep, but their receivers do have some ability to create after the catch. So you have to tackle, get to the football, swarm, as you mentioned. And for me, the big key in this game, I want to see the Seahawks take a page out of the Carolina Panthers book. What's fascinating, Nick, about this Panthers team, they are 3rd in sack rate in the NFL, and they are the lowest blitzing team by a pretty wide margin. Under 8% of their defensive snaps this year, they have brought more than 4 rushers. I want to see the Seahawks. Last week, they had to blitz some to get that pass rush going. I want to see this front line with Draymond Jones and Uchenna Nwosu, hopefully a healthy Jaron Reed and Boye Mafe, Derek Hall and company. I want to see those players take over and win their one-on-ones so that you're not resorting to having to blitz Bobby Wagner or blitzing Trey Brown or blitzing Kobe Bryant all the time. Not saying that you don't want to be aggressive and mix some of those in, but I want to see that front 5 really get after the quarterback. And Andy Dalton is not a mobile QB. If you are able to get 4 rushers that are able to get pressure on him and you're still dropping 7 back, that is a huge win, because if you're having to blitz, he's a veteran quarterback. He knows where to go with the football to beat the blitz. But if you can get pressure on him with just 4 rushers or 5 rushers at most, and you are able to drop guys back into coverage and do what you need to do in the back end, then I think you have a much better chance of making Andy Dalton look like a pedestrian backup quarterback like he is supposed to be at this stage of his career. So to me, that is key number one. I want to see them win with those one-on-ones up front and not have to blitz very much, limit those windows in coverage, and also make it that Andy Dalton isn't comfortable. If you can do that, you can maintain your gap responsibilities in the run game. And as you mentioned, clean up the tackles. And you got to believe the Seahawks have a very good chance to get their first home win. If they aren't able to do those things, this could be a repeat of last December, and this game could be uglier than we anticipate it's going to be at Lumen Field. Coming up next, we are going to dish out our weekly picks to click and our game predictions. You won't want to miss it. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks, which is brought your way by friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. This week on Prize Picks, I'm selecting Ken Walker III to rush for 80 yards. That's a bold one against this Panthers defense. And Devontae Adams to surpass 100 yards for the Raiders. Prize Picks is an absolute blast each week and is an easy way to enjoy daily fantasy without the hassle and land quick winnings. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. You're listening to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined for today's show by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to each and every one of you 12s out there that make Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Don't forget, we'll have our weekly post-game show after the conclusion of Panthers Seahawks on Sunday. Game balls, 3 up, 3 down, key storylines, and much more. You won't want to miss it. This game coming up on Sunday, the Seahawks could be looking to enact a little bit of revenge. Yes, the teams are different, especially the Panthers, but Carolina came in and dealt a pretty bad blow to Seattle's playoff chances at the time by coming in and getting that 30-24 win at Lumen Field, running down Seattle's throats. Going into this football game, this rematch of sorts here in week 3, Nick, on the offensive side of the football, who are you rolling with as your pick to click that needs to have a big game for the Seahawks to win?
Well, I mentioned with creating yards after contact, and that starts with Ken Walker III. Like I said, I want to see that. Some broken tackles, some forced broken tackles, big runs, wiggling loose. They are in the bottom third in the league in rushing, in a lot of rushing yard categories. Defense, the Carolina Panthers are. It's time for Walker to have that breakout game. This is a team that allowed 75 yards to Taysom Hill. They allowed Tyler Algier. BYU guys apparently are running really wild against this Carolina defense. Taysom Hill and Tyler Algier the last couple weeks. But the Seahawks have a lot of talent to establish the run here. And I like Ken Walker to have his first breakout game of 2023, reach that century mark. And really if I see nothing else about the game and I just see that Ken Walker had, 23 carries for 104 yards and a touchdown, I think they win the game. And not only that, I think they cover if they win, if that happens. So I'm going to go Ken Walker III, create some broken tackles, get to that century mark for the first time this year, and have that breakout game we know he is just itching to have.
I mentioned earlier, without J.C. Horn, that Carolina still got 2 pretty solid outside corners. You got Henderson, the former first-round pick from the Jaguars, Dante Jackson, a more physical corner from LSU. But I feel like the depth at that position, especially without J.C. Horn now being available, I feel like there's a drop-off. And if there's an area the Seahawks can maybe cash in, the Panthers have had a few issues out of the slot. It hasn't led to a lot of yardage to this point, but that could be because the opponents they've been playing didn't have that third target that really was going to cause problems. Seattle does. And I think that this is the game. I don't want to say it's a breakout game necessarily for Jackson Smith and Jigba, but it feels like with the matchups he's going to have, maybe Jeremy Chin ends up going against him. And even in that case, I like the route running ability of Jackson Smith and Jigba to be able to get free, get open. And Geno Smith's going to want to get rid of the ball fairly quickly with how good this pass rush is. Your outlet, your security blanket is Jackson Smith and Jigba. from the slot. He made a few big plays last week, had that 16-yard first down conversion, had a couple other really nice catches. It feels like he is on the verge. Again, I don't want to use the term breakout game, but it feels like he is on the verge of having a game where he makes 6-7 catches, 50-plus yards, maybe gets that first touchdown. In fact, I'm predicting it right now. Jackson Smith-Njigba will score his first NFL touchdown this week against the Carolina Panthers. So I like the matchups he's going to have in the slot against a Panthers secondary that's had some injuries. No Shaq Thompson in the middle either. So they're going to be more willing to get those routes rolling to the inside of the defense. Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think that's a big play for him. Now on defense, this is a Panthers offense that struggled, but as we've mentioned time and time again, Andy Dalton, one of the kryptonite quarterbacks, is going to be playing for the Panthers. Who is your pick to click for the Seahawks on defense, Nick?
Yeah, I think kryptonite is the color red this time with the red rifle for the Seahawks. And hopefully his kryptonite can be one Quandre Diggs. Quandre Diggs has had a little bit of an up and down start. He's tied for the team lead in missed tackles per Pro Football Focus. However, teams are yet to complete a pass against a coverage from Quandre Diggs this year. Very up and down start. I like him to have his best game of the season here, rack up some tackles, and I'm going to call it right now. I think that he puts all Seahawks fans' minds at ease with this red rifle backup quarterback jinx with this first interception of the year, and flips the tables there, and maybe even a forced fumble. I really think that Quandre Diggs can have a breakout game of his own here and be disruptive in more ways than one. So I'm going to go Quandre Diggs here. And I think the version of Quandre Diggs that has made 3 straight Pro Bowls shows up here week 3.
I'm going to be basing this some off what happened last year when Andy Dalton was playing quarterback for the Saints. He was able to control the football game. And yet here's the thing about Dalton. Colt McCoy has not thrown many interceptions when the Seahawks have faced against him. Not a lot of points in some of those games, but he's been pretty seamless in terms of, or spotless in terms of mistakes. He's done a good job taking care of football. Andy Dalton has thrown 4 interceptions in his 4 career starts against the Seahawks, and Reek Woolen had one of them last year as a rookie. So I think that it's going to happen again, that a rookie corner for the Seahawks is going to pick off Andy Dalton, and I'm picking Devin Witherspoon to be the one that does it this time around. We saw him in position to get his hands on the football a couple times last week in his debut. I think he's going to be much more comfortable this week in his second NFL start. And you can see the playmaking instincts this kid had at Illinois. They already were showing last week. Pete Carroll was excited, even with that flea flicker. All right, we're going to throw that play out. Everybody bid on that, not just Devin Witherspoon. I have seen enough from him, though, already in this one game to believe that he is going to find a way to bait Andy Dalton. And Dalton, as a veteran quarterback, he is still a guy that can do this occasionally. Woolen did it to him last year where he gets lulled a little bit into security. Hey, that's open. I have a feeling Devin Witherspoon's going to do that to him, and he's going to get an interception. He's going to have another pass breakup. I think it's going to be a really good game for Devin Witherspoon on the outside. Rookie corners, that has been Andy Dalton's kryptonite going against the Seahawks. Richard Sherman picked him off as a rookie way back in 2011. Fun facts there. So rookie corners, that has been Andy Dalton's one issue playing against the Seattle Seahawks. Maybe the Seahawks should just promote Lance Boykin and start him at the other corner spot so they have 2 rookie corners out there. No, I'm not really suggesting that. But anyway, let's get to our game predictions now. Nick, you and I both picked the Seahawks to lose last week, and they ended up winning. So maybe we need to stick with the reverse jinx script here. But how do you see this game playing out on Sunday?
I almost went that same mentality. The injury situation scares me. The backup quarterback jinx, it does scare me. I mean, I don't know. You've been following the Seahawks long enough to know that is uncomfortable, I think is the right word. Missed tackles scare me. The Seahawks being ranked 30th in pass defense scares me. The Seahawks are clearly the more talented roster. They're deeper, yet they're also more injured. This is going to be close. The Seahawks are currently, it was 6. The spread was 6 in Seahawks' favor. Now it's moved down to 5.5, probably because of the injury list longer than the Harry Potter books. I think Carolina covers. I think it's, again, uncomfortable, maybe a little ugly with a little bit of rain, perhaps, in the forecast. You can talk me into the Seahawks actually losing this game. You really can. The injuries are that concerning. And the Panthers are better than the Detroit Lions in some aspects on defense. When the game gets kind of mucked up like this, give me the better quarterback at home, and that's Geno Smith. And maybe even Jason Myers gets a field goal as time expires. And, maybe they're inspired, that the defense hopefully is inspired by them celebrating the Super Bowl 48 team, perhaps. So I'm going to go Seahawks win a close, uncomfortable, mucky game, 20-17, maybe a late field goal. The Panthers do cover, but the Seahawks win. Kind of an uncomfy game. But hey, in the NFL, a win's a win.
Yeah, I was going to go the same route that you did, just because even going back to the Cam Newton days, it always seemed like these two teams had low-scoring games that had a bunch of offensive miscues more than great defense. And that carried over until last year's game, where both teams did put up at least 24 points. Geno Smith made some plays down the stretch, but it wasn't enough. Carolina ran the football all over the Seahawks. I don't think that's going to happen on Sunday, though. I think, you know what? Maybe I'm buying too much in 2 games, but I am buying Seattle's run defense being significantly better than last year. Bobby Wagner in the middle. I've been impressed by Draymond Jones, what we've seen from him. I think Jaron Reed's going to be fine to play in this game from what I've been told. I think Boye Mafe coming back is going to help the run defense. Uchenna Nwosu's played well in that regard. And I think if Carolina is not able to control the game running the football, Andy Dalton doesn't have the weapons around him that he even had with the Saints last year. They don't have DJ Moore. He's in Chicago. Adam Thielen is still a good player, but he is not what he was 3 or 4 years ago. They just don't have many guys that can create separation. Against Seattle's defense, they find ways to make it. Those guys find separation. But I think that this is going to be the game where the pass defense shores things up a little bit. And I think that the talent discrepancy is going to show up. So I think this game is close until middle of the second half. And then by spread standards, Seattle covers with an 11-point win. I'm going to go 31-20. I think they get a little bit of a late explosion of points. Once they have worn the Panthers down a little bit, I do think the Seahawks will be able to run the ball in this game. I'm confident they're going to have their entire interior offensive line available for this game as well. If one of those players is missing, then I might want to revisit this. But based on what I've been told, it sounds like they're going to have Lewis and Haynes, and Evan Brown's already a full participant. All those guys are going to be back. I think Seattle's going to be able to run the football. I expect they're going to be able to get a few shot plays in there in the passing game, especially off play action. And I think the defense is going to make enough plays to make sure that Andy Dalton doesn't get that 4th win in 5 starts against the Seahawks. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick at Nick Lee 51. Subscribe and follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Don't forget, coming up after the game, it'll probably be a few hours after the game, I have to do my other reporter duties, obviously getting interviews and all that stuff taken care of. But we will have our post-game Locked On Seahawks, Panthers, Seahawks. Hopefully we'll be breaking down a victory for a second straight week. Make sure you are listening in. And thanks for listening to today's show. Go Hawks.